Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And you may not know, but there was actually a Boomkin buff in patch 11.1.5. This is a buff that was supposed to be previously applied in the previous patch, but didn't actually go live. And this buff is now live. It is buffing our damage over time effects, Sunfire and Moonfire specifically, by around 30%. And so I wanted to give this a go in Solo Shuffle and see what was going on with Boomkin, because I'd had some frustrations with it and wanted to see if I could find some more success with it. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at the Balanced Druid in my most recent experience with it. You can see there's a lot of players playing Frost Mage. There's 2 Frost Mages in this lobby, and this poor guy trying to make Unholy DK still work in the current meta. Main goal is to get dots up onto the target. We're going to Trance, Incarn, Root Beam, and spam the crap out of Star Surge onto the Mage. And we're going to try and look for Cyclones here because our Mage is kind of getting low, but we're getting interrupted. Generally, you're going to have to trade cooldowns for Icy Veins. It's just a scary moment in the game against a Frost Mage, and Icy Veins is this blue icon with an 8 on it for the Mage. Whenever you see that from an enemy Mage, you know that you're about to get your socks rocked. Now we're playing aggressively because they are attacking our Mage and not us. So this is very important to acknowledge when you're playing Balanced Druid, is that when you're not the target, you need to be a playmaker. You need to be getting on top of the enemy healer and trying to get crowd control. So I pushed in, got a clone. This forced in Ice Block. My Mage was then able to get a Ring of Frost. This forced in Icebound Fortitude. And as a result of getting crowd control here, we can get a lot of pressure. Now I'm chaining this into another Force of Nature Incarn, spamming out the Star Surges. I've noticed that my UI is a lot glitchy here on this patch. Like my Eclipse is not tracked on my personal resource display anymore in the middle of my screen, which is a little bit alarming. You definitely want to like update your add-ons, maybe turn them off with this patch to make sure that everything is working out well. We get an Ice Wall, which forces the Mage to retreat. And again, as a Boomkin, don't really want a tunnel vision. You just want to kind of attack whatever is nearby. So I switch back onto the Death Knight for a moment. The Mage is in a barrier. The Mage is out of range. So there's no point really in kind of chasing down the Mage at this point. But I've got Root Solar Beam coming up in about 2 seconds. So I'm starting to position a little bit more closely to the enemy healer. We force an Ice Block with just straight raw pressure. And you can see that we're doing a significant amount of damage. We can push in for a Root Beam as the Mage comes out of the Ice Block. Continue spamming out some Star Surges. Try and look for a Cyclone at low HP here. Also just trying to get through the interrupts so that hopefully in the future I'll be able to switch that Cyclone over to the enemy Priest. But generally speaking, I'm just focusing on maxing my damage at this point in the game. That forces Pain Suppression. We're going to pop Force of Nature, swap to the Death Knight. We don't want to attack into Pain Suppression as it's going to reduce our damage significantly. We can switch to the Death Knight. Almost clutch out a kill as the Priest trinkets and void shifts at like 1% health, and we're still maintaining quite a significant amount of pressure throughout this game because we were doing like double. A lot of this is, again, a little bit of pad on Death Knight pets, but not a huge amount because it's mostly just Sunfire. I'm not playing a Starfall build, and we're just continuing to hammer damage out, get into Eclipse, or as best I could with not knowing if I was in Eclipse or not with the UI changes that came through. But we get pulled away, and we're going to start taking some damage here because likely, you know, their enemy cooldowns are going to be coming off here pretty soon. We're going to take a lot of damage. I don't have a Bark Skin, so when I don't have a Bark Skin, I got limited defense. I got to focus on kind of pulling away from the engagement. And there's that Icy Veins from the Mage, and now that I don't have Bark Skin, I'm very reluctant to push out. I'd much rather they attack my Mage, who has an Ice Block, who can then immune all of this damage that they're pumping out, as opposed to me. So there's no reason for me to continue pushing in. This is where the balance of playing Balanced Druid comes in. When you figure out, hey, you're the target, you're vulnerable, you need to know when to pull away from the engagement so you don't ultimately die. Let your teammates play aggressively, and they were able to kind of run through them, finish the Mage for me, while I was able to kind of retreat, hide, and recover, and wait for more easy crowd control like a Solar Beam or a bash, as opposed to trying to push it on top of them, cycloning them while you're dying at the same time. So being able to flex between those two, recognize when you're able to attack freely, are definitely like the most important components. I was checking out the damage breakdown. Moonfire is significantly a higher portion of your damage with the buffs that came through. You are still pretty squishy, and this lobby didn't have some specs that are generally... DK can actually be pretty hard for Boomkin, but I would say, like, you know, a Fury Warrior is likely going to be a lot more intimidating. We're just going to start with Solar Beam from Stealth. Try and get some dots going. We get put into a Ring of Frost. My healer's counterspelled, so I choose to trinket this and bash the Mage on Icy Veins. Again, trading on Icy Veins is almost mandatory, so my trinket to bash to get their trinket means I can maybe crowd control them a little bit later. And we're fighting double Frost Mage, so it's double Icy Veins, probably double trouble. So I'm focused on Cyclones here, focused on stunning, focused on limiting their damage output, maxing my damage on the target that I'm not crowd controlling, which in this case is the top Mage numbing. I see our healer's in a polymorph, so I'm tossing out off heals with regrowth. Likely looking for clones. I fake a kick. I'm able to cyclone the other Mage now. We can kind of get through their opener a little bit easier this way, and you just want to focus on buffering damage. If you try and like go head to head with that cooldown particularly, you're almost always going to lose that exchange. you need to focus on shutting down their damage and limiting their uptime. Now, they've got barrier down. They're taking reduced damage, but we're still kind of just firing our rotation into it anyways. Get interrupts out of the way. But I don't have bark skin, so I'm not running in like 100%. You know, I'm not totally go hung here and just running in on top of them just yet until they've actually committed to retreating away as a team. I don't want to leave a mage behind who's on top of my healer polymorphing them. So if one of these mages is pushing aggressively, I would clone them, limit them, and then me and my priest can kind of slip past that mage, get in a little bit more closely. I can knock the priest away from fearing me, look for a cyclone. Priest fades it, fears me. Kind of annoying because I'm out of my priest line, so he can't dispel me. But I have Solar Beam now, and I have Bash, and they've got an Icy Veins proc, so we're luckily going to have to trade here. Anti-Magic Shield. Their priest jumps in the air, so I jump across to bash the Icy Veins. They're starting to build up a labyrinth of ice walls here, but we're not too worried. Our priest is healing us from the top side ramp. We get Alter Time. We're just waiting. We don't have a Force of Nature anyway, so we're just trying to maintain and keep our Moonkin aura buff up right now. Keep dots spread on targets, maybe try and get some interrupts out of the way, and limit some damage, because I can see counter spells coming in on my healer here. We pop Force of Nature, and we get rung on it. We're pretty sad, but it just breaks immediately. We're going to jump out of the Snowdrift stun, which is that blue circle on the ground. That will stun you if you stand in it too long. And as a druid, you can shapeshift, so cancel your form and go back into a form to prevent it from stacking and building a stun on you. But now I see Blinding Sleet on their priest, so I'm going to try and do some damage. Again, with the Death Knight, I feel like I'm a little bit more passive. Maybe I could have been a bit more aggressive, but we don't have a lot of disruption. So, you know, running into a double Frost Mage might put me into the shredder a bit. I'm going to knock the priest away here because I see him pushing towards my priest to try and get a fear. Paying attention to enemies coming in, using knockbacks and roots to impede their advance is always a good idea. Here, I should have been a little bit more cautious because the priest is getting pretty close to us. I should have jumped away because it's very obvious he really wanted to fear, right? From like, you know, seconds ago. And now they've got double Icy Veins and I'm stuck in a fear. So this is a very scary moment. They already broke through anti-magic zone together with double Icy Veins and double Frost. So we're trying to cycle them. We're trying to get interrupts here so our healers don't have to deal with them if they don't. And we're trying to limit their damage. We have Bash at this period of time as well. So we really just want to focus on stunning, cycloning, limiting, and then doing damage after we've limited their output. And we're kind of line of sighting here at the pillar, avoiding a lot of pressure, keeping up our range damage, forcing block from the top mage, swapping back to the middle mage, just always doing damage to anything that we can. Meteor comes in here. I could bark skin. I think bark skinning Comet Storm, Icy Veins window, you're going to always want to do that. It's never not going to be a bad idea. And I can see that I'm just tanking interrupts at this point. We got a pain suppression. So feeling a little bit more confident to push in. I've got a solar beam. We got a pain suppression. And we got Icebound Fortitude. I see the priest and a stun. They're starting to fall behind. So the game is kind of, you know, lapsed enough time here and racked up dampening a bit. So I do want to play a little more aggressively. So I'm starting to push in with my Death Knight, try and give them a bit more support. Here I can use my Stampeding Roar to sprint my priest and myself around this wall. That would otherwise be very annoying to get around. So again, paying attention to, you know, the map, the zone, what can you do to assist your allies in order to get to their target. And I see the priest is rotting down. They're really starting to struggle. And honestly, I was surprised at how good Boomy Death Knight felt. You know, once you have dampening stacked up a bit, like the amount of rot pressure that Death Knight and Boomy can do together now with the damage over time effect buffs this far into dampening was pretty good. Like, I don't, you know, it's very not often that you'll see like enemy team all 50% and lower at the same time. So it's kind of fun to create that type of pressure that you can really only do in Solo Shuffle because 3v3 dampening is a little bit too slow, but we're just going to run them over. Big Star Surge straight to the mage's face, knock him down, easy peasy. This is the first time I logged on my Boomkin in a while. I got to like 2400 on it, and then I wanted to give it a go again and see if I was going to enjoy it or not, and I really did. In this lobby, I felt really strong. Gonna have to give it another one also. I need to test it more into Fury Warriors, I think, is the main culprit. But at this rating, there's just a lot of mages, I think, because it's such a good spec and high rating. Here they've got Icy Veins. So again, we're going Bear Farm, Frenzy Regenning. We're going to Bark Skin. I'm not going to hold any cooldowns. There's no reason to. And I see anti-magic zone, and the enemies are running away. So rather than just like Force of Nature incarning right now, I'm going to use Stampede and kind of just run, kind of just kite this out. Like they got Icy Veins up, and they got Zone and Pain Suppression. Like, I don't really need to be getting in there and popping my cooldowns just yet. They're kind of throwing everything to me. So I'm going to wait for these cooldowns to subside before I make my first big move. But we're still kind of getting trained. So when you're getting attacked by a melee, I generally do like pulling them away from the enemy healer, especially if you've got double caster. So that way the Death Knight's far away from the enemy healer and your partner can push in and get crowd control. For some reason, I actually went against that play move though by moving out here. So I use Solar Beam on the mage here defensively. Debatably not worth it. Sometimes can be worth it. I really only think it's only worth doing if you're really desperate, which I kind of felt in that position with how much damage I was taking. I think it was me reassessing, like, why am I running in when I'm getting attacked? It should really be my mage running in, and I should be pulling the Death Knight away, and that's likely where a lot of that chaos was attributed to. So you get a polymorph here on the healer with the Dragon's Breath. I don't know why he broke it. It looks like he put a blizzard on it, but generally speaking, this is how you're going to be trading when you have a ranged DPS in your team. Is a ranged DPS who's not getting attacked, runs in on top of the other healer. Ranged DPS who is getting attacked pulls the enemy attackers out of line of sight into a bad position, but not generally, maybe not completely out of line of sight, but out of range. So that way your ally can still cast on them. Being a caster and running around a pillar and lining your allies, they can't do any damage to them, is generally not good. And I do see that as like a pretty common mistake at lower ratings. But we're going to focus more of our cyclones on DPS, wait for an opening, and then when that opening presents itself, we're going to then push in on top of the healer, focus more on just overall throughput. And find your moment a little bit later in the game as opposed to trying to force it. But their cooldowns are over, right? We lived their Icy Veins, lived the Apocalypse. We kind of lived their burst moments. We can play a little bit more aggressive towards their healer. Their mage is doing a good job of guarding their healer, so we're going to try and Solar Beam. Fortunately, again, it breaks to like, I don't even know what broke that. It didn't look like anything, but we're going to cast a clone. It's overlapped with Sheep, but at least now we don't have to worry about the Sheep breaking to AoE, because obviously there's a lot of AoE damage firing in there. We got the Death Knight pinned at the pillar, and now we've got them in a position where we can definitely be more aggressive. Now, when they're running and they're at 10%, you kind of got to get triangle positioning where you got one caster on one side of the pillar, one caster on the other, so that way you can pincer them together. And obviously, you don't have voice comms and shuffle, so you just kind of have to pay attention to where your ally is going and go the opposite direction of them when they're on the pillar. I get gripped in on top of them, so I'm going to Bark Skin, and I'm going to kind of plant my feet here and just kind of do damage because we have them so low at this point. I don't want to be retreating with the amount of pressure that we have. I'd much rather kind of be forcing some major cooldowns or looking for some cyclones and really start putting some pressure on them, because I have defensive cooldowns to reduce their attacks, and they have limited, options to be able to survive in this position. So it's about recognizing that and then switching gears, and now we're going aggressive. Now we're getting polymorphs. Now we're pushing in on top of them. Their big window of burst and opportunity is over. I can get some crowd control, look for some cyclones. We could counterspell. We can use Void Shift. Again, this is using defensives to stay aggressive, which is a very important component, but it's something you don't want to do really early in the match. You want to save it until a little bit later. But basically, this lobby just continued to progress with me winning every single round, and I will be fair with it. I think this was a much more Boomkin-friendly lobby than a lot of ones that you might be experiencing at lower ratings. So I am going to be doing my best to get more details and more information about this, and hopefully a lobby that has something like a warrior, a ret paladin, and some combination of melee DPS that are going to be very high in representation. But as far as competitive viability, I noticed the damage increase, and I think that's the most important component. And then obviously, if you level up your skills in the play style with Balanced Druid, I think you can have success with it in this current iteration. Although it would be nice to get a little bit of a durability increase. Same with Death Knights and Warlocks, right? I think those are like the four main ones that could use a little defense bump, especially against physical attacks. Not so much magic attacks, but against physical attacks, they could all use a little bit of a bump. But regardless, I actually had fun with it. Which was surprising because I had gone through a phase of just like getting really frustrated with Boomkin and kind of wanting to retire it and throw it away. But I actually did enjoy it on this most recent session. I think it's my highest rated character now. I think I got 2,500 after this lobby. But that's pretty much it. We're going to rinse, repeat, focus on rotating between defense and offense, crowd controlling enemy CDs, and you're going to start to see a lot of success. I'm sure you're going to be able to get to 1,800 even with just those common points of advice, as long as you're able to max out your damage, which on Boomkin, honestly, it's not that hard to do really good damage. I've played a lot of classes at 2,400, done 2,400 shuffle challenges on a lot, but Boomkin is one of the easier ones to actually get your damage off. Just Force of Nature, Incarn, spam Star Surge. Dots on the target, you're doing great. Spam Cyclones in between, you're going to make it. You're going to be able to get to your goals. But I just wanted to relay my thoughts on Boomkin, what I think of it at the moment. Definitely still weaker on the defense side. Need to get a lobby that is a little bit more challenging for Balanced Druid, and when I do, I will relay that information over to you. So thank you guys very much for watching. If you guys like this type of content and want to continue to support me on my journey of getting to 100,000 subscribers, then make sure to smash the subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I will see you in the next one.